Miss Jackson, a grandmother on a mission, was certain of one thing. This tiny girl was not her granddaughter. Her son, now behind bars, had fallen into the web of a woman she branded as a serial liar. A woman who, Miss Jackson claimed, had been intimate with multiple men at the time of conception. And now, she was determined to prove it in front of a room full of strangers.
Ms. Jackson, you are petitioning the court to determine the paternity of your alleged granddaughter. You claim your son, who is currently incarcerated, would be a fool to think he fathered Miss Pickens' one-year-old daughter.
On the opposite side of the courtroom stood Miss Pickens. She admitted to being with at least 2 men during the time in question. Still, she insisted that Miss Jackson's son was the father of her 1-year-old daughter. She argued that Miss Jackson had initially accepted the baby, but somewhere along the line, that acceptance had turned into cold rejection.
Now, Miss Pickens, you admit to sleeping with at least 2 other men while involved with Miss Jackson's son. You argue Ms. Jackson initially accepted your daughter with open arms, but now has turned on you both.
There was anticipation as each woman prepared to tell their version of the truth. Miss Jackson didn't mince words. According to her, she had never welcomed the child. She recalled the day Miss Pickens showed up at her doorstep, the baby already 4 months old. It was the first time she had even heard of the child, or of Miss Pickens for that matter. She recounted how Miss Pickens had once claimed the child belonged to another man.
Why did you initially accept the baby if you had doubts?
Your Honor, I never accepted the baby. That's a lie. I stated from day one, I do not believe this is my granddaughter. She first, if I can bring you into my reality.
I want to go in. Tell me what happened.
Okay, she came to my home with her mother and another family member. Let me remind you, this child was already 4 months old.
The judge attempted to keep order, but emotions were already spilling over. Miss Pickens finally had her turn. She admitted she had believed another man was the father. In fact, when she first discovered she was pregnant, she was certain of it. She even considered a DNA test, but never went through with it. So why the sudden change to Miss Jackson's son? Miss Pickens offered an explanation.
When did you change your mind and decide, no, not that guy, it's Miss Jackson's son? When did you change your mind and why?
When he pursued me, calling me and like, oh, well, that's my baby, this, that.
Miss Jackson scoffed. She insisted there was no resemblance, no connection. To Miss Jackson, the baby was an intruder, a living reminder of what she saw as a blatant attempt to entangle her family in a lie. But then came the twist. Miss Pickens claimed that despite Miss Jackson's protests, there had been a time when she had allowed the baby into her home, had shown interest, and had even fostered a semblance of a relationship. Miss Jackson shot back.
Miss Jackson, even looking at this shot, you still don't see the resemblance.
I see that all 3 of them can stand by each other, and y'all would think that's her son than mine. Yes.
These women are angry, and if the judge doesn't do something, the situation might turn physical. Ms. Jackson maintained that she had no relationship with the child, and that any relationship that was imagined was pushed by her son, who desperately wants to believe that the child is his.
You're saying Ms. Jackson actually expressed interest and established a relationship
Never.
Yes.
with the baby?
Yes, never. I never had
1 second, ma'am.
I never established a relationship with this child. We got text messages that will even sit up here and say I never established.
According to Ms. Jackson, her son, the so-called potential father, was in prison, which cast a major doubt on the paternity of the child. In fact, she has requested a DNA test twice, and Ms. Pickens has chickened out. But that was not the only reason she was suspicious.
First part of your doubt is you don't feel like the baby looks like your son.
Exactly.
Okay,
no
and
grandmother
next,
connection.
You don't have a grandmother connection.
No.
Meaning when you look at the baby, you
I
don't
do
have
not.
that feeling
Exactly.
that
this is my grandchild. I have 2 grandchildren that I love dearly and take very good care of them.
Ms. Pickens' mother, Sonia, countered. Yes, her daughter had lied about being pregnant with twins. Yes, she had blurred timelines and partners. But Sonia clung to hope. The baby had to be Nicole's grandchild. She'd seen the resemblance herself.
Oh, Your Honor, I'm not gonna say what my child don't do wrong and what she is, because at times she is wrong. But at the same time, if she having a problem with Aaliyah, why do this one gotta get in it? This grown woman. So my child's 19 and I got a 30-something-year-old woman. I'm talking.
Then, the long-awaited moment arrived. After hours of testimony and mounting tension, the envelope containing the DNA test results was presented. The entire courtroom held its breath as the judge read the results.
Mrs. Jackson, you are
Nah, her grandmother.
Gotcha.
6 weeks. That was all the time Mrs. Smith had to grieve the death of her late son before Ms. Manning arrived at her doorstep with a bombshell. She was pregnant. And now, nearly 2 years later, the truth hangs in the balance, suspended by a DNA test that could either stitch up or further rip apart the gaping wound in Mrs. Smith's heart.
Miss Smith, you and your daughter say 6 weeks after your son, Nafi, was killed, the defendant popped up and claimed she was pregnant with his baby. Now that child, Nala, is almost 2, and you don't believe Nafi is her father.
For Mrs. Smith and her daughter, Nalaya, this wasn't just a matter of paternity. It was a question of exploitation. They believed Ms. Manning had slid into their lives with a calculating eye on financial gain. Ms. Manning insisted she had always been certain of Nahala's paternity. To her, the little girl was the spitting image of Nafi. She had his smile, his spark, his everything.
Ms. Manning, you
Yes, Your
state
Honor.
Nafi Smith is 100% your daughter's father and say today's results will prove your case and clear your name.
The story that unfolded was as tragic as it was chaotic. Nafi had been a bright light in his family, a young man full of promise whose life was violently cut short on an ordinary Thursday. He had only gone to the store to grab a soda. The poor mother carried the crushing burden of what-ifs.
I asked what happened.
On November 8th, 2013, we were watching football. It was a Thursday. I had ordered pizza, got everything except for the soda. So he was like, Mom, I'll go to the store. I was like, it's okay, I don't really need it. And he was like, no, I'll go. And then my daughter got a call that someone said that he had been shot at the corner.
When Miss Manning announced her pregnancy, Mrs. Smith had grasped at the possibility of a piece of her son living on. She attended doctor's appointments, showed up at the hospital when Nala was born, and even planned the child's first birthday party. But somewhere along the line, doubt crept in.
How soon after your son's passing did you receive this news?
It was early in her pregnancy because I actually went to her with her and her family to the first appointment.
You did?
Yes, ma'am.
So you felt like this was true?
It's a possibility.
Although Mrs. Smith was free to doubt the paternity, Ms. Manning wasn't taking it well. Going through the pregnancy process only for your baby daddy's family to doubt your authenticity is enough to make anyone sad.
Miss Manning, I can see this hurts you very much that this is in question.
I'm hurt. I'm really hurt because this never came to my knowledge that it was any doubt that my daughter was not his child. I felt as though they should have came to me if they had any doubts.
The doubt started with previous lies. Ms. Manning had lied about being pregnant before. Also, one of Ms. Manning's friends had confided in Nalaya, suggesting that more than one man could be Nala's father. Mrs. Smith didn't want to believe it, but the seed of doubt had been planted.
Do you remember your initial thoughts the day that you found out that Ms. Manning was pregnant?
Yes, Your Honor. She called me and said, well, it's a possibility that I'm pregnant by your brother.
But Ms. Manning countered. She has no regard for Nalaya's whispers and doubts. She is only focused on the great work Mrs. Smith has done for her and her baby. For Mrs. Smith, getting the facts today is all she cares for.
Do you think she has these doubts?
I have no clue. To me, honestly, I don't care about her doubts. We're just here for Mrs. Smith and myself to know that Nyla Serenity Manning Smith is her grandchild.
And then there was the matter of the other woman, Ms. Caesar. Nafi had been living with her at the time of his death, not Ms. Manning. Mrs. Smith couldn't reconcile this. How could her son have fathered Ms. Manning's child when he had seemingly built a life with someone else? The timeline felt off.
Hello, Ms. Caesar, please have a seat. Thank you for joining us today. We understand that at the time of his untimely death, you were living with her brother, and you were in a relationship.
Yes.
With him.
Were.
Mrs. Smith's daughter, Nalaya, was the embodiment of cautious logic. She had been the one first to tell her mother about the pregnancy, and now she bore the guilt of what that news had brought. She feared the blame would rest squarely on her if the DNA results returned negative. But would it?
Ms. Smith is not related to Nala Manning Smith.
Then who could it be then? Because I was the only guy I was dealing with. Then who could it be? Can I leave?
Just take a deep breath.
When Lisa McBirth marched into the courtroom, it was clear this wasn't a joke. She wasn't just here for the DNA test results, she was here for blood. Beside her stood her son, Kakitho Hughes, a man seemingly caught in the crossfire between his mother and his ex-girlfriend, LaToya Jackson. But if you think this is just another paternity dispute, you are wrong. Very wrong.
Mr. Hughes, you say you're stuck between your mother and your ex-girlfriend who are in a heated dispute in court today. Ms. McBirth, you petitioned the court for a DNA test to prove your son, Kakitho Hughes, is not the father of Ms. Jackson's 2-year-old son, Elijah Jackson.
From the moment the judge addressed the courtroom, it became evident that the tension between Lisa and LaToya had been simmering for far too long. LaToya, however, wasn't backing down. She insisted Lisa had been poisoning Kakitho's mind, filling his head with doubts about the child's paternity. But why? What was the real story here?
Ms. Jackson, you say Ms. McBirth has been poisoning her son by convincing him he's not the biological father of your child. You claim the timing does add up, and today's paternity test will prove you right.
Could this have been about more than just paternity? Lisa wasted no time launching her attack. According to Lisa, Elijah looked nothing like Kakitho or anyone else in their family. LaToya revealed that she and Kakitho had been together for over a year, and as far as she knew, theirs was a committed relationship. Committed? Lisa and her sister, Ms. Terrell, nearly planted their eyes at the back of their heads.
Why do you think she's in so much doubt over your child?
I have no idea, to be honest. Like, maybe because he is so white?
Because he all the white. He ain't got no black in here. Everything I see got powder puff on it. I don't see no chocolate nowhere, okay?
No, ma'am.
Whatever.
If you believed them, LaToya was nothing but a fling, a fly-by-night visitor in Kakitho's otherwise stable life. Lisa's anger was almost feral. She painted LaToya as a manipulator, desperate to push Elijah into their family. She described the first time she saw the child at a doctor's office.
For 10 years, so all she basically was for him was a snack cake on the side of his meal.
There
was nothing more.
Thank you. A side chick.
And all she has done is she's been trying to put the baby on us.
Cold, absolute, final. Judge Lauren even had to remind her that African-American babies come in all shades and sizes. But Lisa was adamant. She claimed LaToya had once confessed that she didn't know who the father was. A damning statement if true.
Well, let me first, of course, state the obvious, which I'm hoping you know as well, being African American. You know our children come in all colors, shades.
Elijah
She told me
very white.
She told me she didn't know who the father was. First she's changed her story up different times about who's the father.
The courtroom dynamic shifted. LaToya, visibly stung, defended herself. She argued that if she didn't believe Elijah was Kakitho's son, why would she want his name on the birth certificate? However, the question only seemed to bolster Lisa's claims. After all, Kakitho's name wasn't on the certificate. No one was. Lisa jumped on this, suggesting the baby could belong to anybody. And then, the courtroom exploded.
And so hold on now, if you don't think the child is his, why would she be trying to change the name?
Well, we've been trying to change the name a couple weeks ago, even we talked about it.
He's two years.
My son ain't said
his
no lie
name's
like
not even
that.
on the
Stop
birth
lying.
certificate.
Stop lying.
Okay.
Whose name is on the birth certificate? Do you know?
Nobody's.
Ms. Terrell dropped a bombshell, alleging LaToya had recently hosted a wild, intimate party that was shut down by the police. LaToya's face burned with anger. But Terrell didn't let up. The audience murmured, and the judge struggled to maintain order. It was chaos.
I'm sick of all these little hookers trying to say my son is the daddy. I'm sick of it. I get babies dropped off here, dropped off there. I'm sick of it.
But
it stops today. Because that baby is not my son.
Here's the thing that she does.
It is.
Here's the
Sorry.
That's a lie.
Yes,
No,
That's
it's
a lie.
It feels that no matter how the results go, this would spill out of the courtroom. But amid the shouting, the judge turned her attention to Kakitho and asked about his role in this mess. Lisa insisted that Elijah wasn't his responsibility, but did he agree?
Do you believe you are Elijah's father?
I just gave him the benefit of the doubt because I'm biracial. My father's white, you know, so.
That child is not my son's, okay?
Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The judge held the DNA results in her hand, the paper that could shatter lives or stitch them back together. The courtroom fell silent, and even Lisa's venom seemed to dry up.
Mr. Hughes, you are Elijah's father.
No! No! What? That's a lie! That's a lie!
At the heart of this storm was Ms. Hooker, a woman whose anger had been simmering for months. With her young daughter Kenia in tow, she came seeking not only an apology, but also vindication, a public acknowledgement that the man she believed had fathered her child was, in fact, responsible for her pain. Her claim was simple yet explosive. Ms. Baker's late son, Mr. Abraham, was the father of her 10-month-old daughter, and the family's repeated public denials had wounded her deeply.
Ms. Hooker, you are here with your mother because you say the defendant's son, Mr. Abraham, fathered your 10-month-old daughter, Kenia. You say that Ms. Baker and her family's public denial of this child has caused you pain, and you are here for an apology.
On the opposing side stood Ms. Baker, a grieving mother representing her deceased son, Mr. Abraham. Her son, who had been taken from the world too soon, killed merely 3 months after Kenia's birth, had, before his untimely death, expressed lingering doubts about his paternity. Ms. Baker maintained that her son's uncertainty and the subsequent defensive stance taken by her family were not acts of denial, but desperate attempts to shield themselves from further heartache.
Ms. Baker, you and your daughter are here today to represent your son, Mr. Abraham, because tragically, he was killed 3 months after the birth of this child. You say that before his death, your son expressed great doubt that he was the father of Ms. Hooker's baby.
The emotional weight of the situation grew as Ms. Coates Hooker recounted her relationship with Ms. Baker's son. At first, it had been casual, merely best friends from childhood, none of it serious. Things shifted, however, when she found herself pregnant and facing the possibility of raising a child alone.
How have you been affected by Ms. Baker's doubts about Kenia's paternity?
I'm just sad sometimes. I try to deal with it now. Like, I really don't care no more. That's how I feel. I don't care anymore. I don't care who feel nothing about my baby. I don't care. It just seemed like everybody else looking upside my head like I'm an animal or something. Like, every time I'm sitting down doing something, they looking at me like I'm the outcast of the group. She looked like me, so why is it a problem? That's why I just say I don't care about nothing.
Ms. Baker maintained that Abraham had always had doubts. He confessed, before his death, that he wasn't the only one involved with Ms. Hooker. He had even asked for a paternity test. This gave Ms. Baker hope that she had the evidence to shut down this mess. She wasn't here for sorrow or sympathy. She wanted closure and believed the truth would correct their doubts.
Explain to the court why there's doubt that Keyshawn is Kenia's biological father.
My son was on vacation, and we kept hearing that Denia was pregnant, but then when we finally found out for sure, he told me, he said he wasn't the only boy that had messed with Denia.
Ms. Hooker's testimony was filled with resentment as she recounted how Ms. Baker's family had publicly dismissed her claim. She suggested that the family's disdain wasn't just about denying paternity, it was a calculated effort to erase Kenia from their lives. But the family had an explanation.
I know my mom said something about, she had a birthday dinner, and my mom did tell me, she said something about she think I didn't like her, or, you know, things like that. Maybe her perception of what other people view of her is just her perception, because she has to understand that sometimes it's hard.
Ms. Baker's side, however, fought back by emphasizing the confusion that had plagued Mr. Abraham in his final days. They described him as a young man tormented by doubts, a man who was too overwhelmed by anger and loss to definitively claim fatherhood. His suspicions, they argued, were not an attempt to reject responsibility, but a tragic reflection of his inner troubles.
Lost. Scared. He was scared. He lost so much weight. He lost a whole lot of weight. Like I told him, you played grown, now it's time to be grown. Because if it's your baby, you not finna run and you not finna leave the whole bag on her.
Him or my family are not those kind of people.
Throughout the proceedings, Ms. Baker's composure shifted between sorrow and a steely resolve to defend her late son's honor, even as her family's reputation was dragged through the mud by the relentless accusations of Ms. Hooker.
All I say is what my baby said to me. Right. I've talked to her, and she know why we here.
Exactly, and listen.
Yeah, I'm the one who wrote the letter.
And that's all I'm concerned with, all this other bickering, and I don't got time for it. Because at the end of the day, this my baby,
right?
And he gone.
Right.
He not coming back. So all this other extra stuff, I don't got time for it.
For Ms. Hooker, the main source of anger was that Mr. Abraham's family did not acknowledge her. Even in the funeral brochure, her name was missing. How could they have listed everyone close to Mr. Abraham but conveniently forget her?
It's not that she feels some type of way. It's like she more hurt behind the obituary. And Miss Carolyn has explained to her about the obituary, how the obituary went. But in her heart, she feel like Miss Bland left her out of the obituary on purpose.
The judge clarified that the truth would be determined not by hurt feelings or bitter rhetoric, but by scientific evidence. A truth that both sides, however reluctantly, could not escape. Because no blood card was available for Mr. Abraham, due to his untimely death, the court had turned to an alternative method, a DNA test using his surviving parents, Carolyn Baker and Lamand Abraham.
Mr. Abraham and Kenaya Abraham is 0%.
And this is why right here.
Miss Baker, are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Do you need to sit down, ma'am?
They weren't gonna tell me sorry, so I'm not telling them nothing.
Do you need to sit down, ma'am?
Nobody did anything to you, honey.
I don't care.
Nobody
do nothing to me, but I don't like you.
Ms. Beckley was here to prove one thing beyond any doubt, that Mr. Allen was the biological father of her 1-year-old daughter, Ida Beckley, and that he had rejected his responsibility for far too long. Today, she wants him to sit up.
Ms. Beckley, you are in court today to prove Mr. Allen is the biological father of your 1-year-old daughter, Ida Beckley.
Yes, Your Honor.
You say Mr. Allen has only seen his daughter one time since she has been born, and you want him to take responsibility starting today. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Allen, however, maintained a totally different view. He insisted that the sequence of events was too chaotic and confusing to result in the pregnancy, as Ms. Beckley described. For him, Ms. Beckley's actions ruled him out as a potential father.
Mr. Allen, you say you are more than certain you are not Italy's biological father and claim Ms. Beckley's accusations are driving a wedge between you and your fiance. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Beckley's anger was clear. She recounted how Mr. Allen had only seen Ida once since her birth. In her eyes, this neglect was not merely an act of omission, but a betrayal. A refusal to accept the consequences of an unprotected, impulsive encounter that occurred under explosive circumstances.
So, Ms. Beckley, how do you feel that Mr. Allen has only seen your daughter once?
I'm very angry, very frustrated. He's been neglecting her from day one since I got pregnant with her. And I'm just sick of it, and I just want him to take responsibility.
Ms. Beckley's voice was filled with anger as she described the physical and emotional toll of raising her daughter alone. Mr. Allen pointed out that their intimacy was so furious that it couldn't have resulted in babies. Wow. We learn every day.
What was the nature of your relationship during the time when Italy was conceived?
Well, me and Miss Beckley had separated. We were co-parenting. We were still good friends.
That's not true. On Germany's 2nd birthday, he wasn't staying with me, but he ended up coming back on her birthday. We had sex, unprotected.
In his account, the night of their reunion was filled with anger rather than careful planning, and the timing of her notification, just a day or two after their encounter, left him with lingering doubts about Italy's true paternity. According to her, it was the product of a night filled with raw, unbridled emotion.
Angry, happy, sad, confused, all those make babies.
Yes, Your Honor, yes.
Did you use protection?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So how long after that did you find out she was pregnant?
Within a day or two?
A day or two?
Yes, Your
That's
Honor.
a lie.
Yes, within a day or two,
That is a lie.
she told me.
How
Yes,
can I
Your
tell you a day after?
Moreover, he pointed to a disturbing pattern. While his name appeared on the birth certificates of his other 2 children, Italy's certificate was conspicuously missing his last name. To him, this omission was a silent admission that perhaps, despite the heated night they shared, he might not be the father after all.
The pregnancy with Italy, was he there for you? Doctor's appointment?
No, ma'am. I had emergency C-section. I was at the hospital by myself. He was not there. He was not there. I have evidence, Your Honor.
I'd like to see it.
He signed Germany's and Xavier's birth certificate. Hers is not signed.
He had wanted a DNA test but had been denied a proper chance to confirm his paternity. Ms. Beckley's refusal to allow a DNA test had repeatedly obstructed this chance. He argued that her reluctance to submit to the test was a clear attempt to hide the truth, to maintain an ambiguous story that served her interests.
Before she said anything, Your Honor, she has nothing to do with it. Whatever she says is false and is irrelevant. She don't know me. I don't know her.
Okay, let me be the judge of that since I'm the judge. State your name for the record.
Cheyenne Montgomery. I'm Darius' fiance. fiance, Your Honor, she has told Darius that he was not the father. It's been said that she's told another guy he was the father.
Amid the back and forth of accusations and counterclaims, the courtroom drama escalated further when testimony emerged, suggesting that Ms. Beckley might have been involved with another man during their separation. A neighbor's report passed on through an intermediary hinted that she had once claimed someone else was the father. This revelation only deepened Mr. Allen's suspicion.
Miss Montgomery,
yes,
you testified that you heard Miss Beckley had been sleeping with another man.
Yes, Your Honor.
Where did you hear this?
From a neighbor of hers.
A neighbor of hers told you this?
A neighbor of hers contacted him and told me and him that she was telling another guy that he was the father.
Then, after what felt like an eternity of heated exchanges and the relentless display of physical and circumstantial evidence, the moment of truth arrived. The judge, whose patience had been stretched to its limits, called for the long-awaited DNA test results.
Mr. Allen, are the father.
Told you. You too, fiance.
Ms. Todd, a woman scorned and desperate for clarity, had dragged her former fiancé, Mr. Foster, into court, determined to prove that he was the biological father of her 4-month-old daughter, Selena. Ms. Todd made it clear that she was not merely fighting for financial support. She was fighting for truth and accountability.
Ms. Todd, you are suing your former fiancé, Mr. Foster, to prove he fathered your 4-month-old daughter, Selena.
Yes, Your Honor.
You say he called off the wedding due to paternity doubts.
Yes, Your Honor.
But Mr. Foster wasn't moved. He told the judge that despite warnings to Ms. Todd not to go and see her so-called male friend, his fiancée had ignored him and went to see the guy. And worse, she spent the night despite being engaged to him.
All right, Mr. Foster, you say Ms. Todd admitted that she cheated on you during the window of conception, so the baby's not yours.
Yes.
So, Mr. Foster, you called off the wedding.
Yes.
Tell the court why.
Me and Miss Todd, we was engaged. The reason why I called it off was because it was one day, a friend of hers, she wanted to go hang out. Miss Todd told me that it was her friend.
Ms. Todd did not deny her actions. She readily admitted that she ignored her husband, went to see a man, and was intimate with him. The court also learned that it wasn't a one-time thing. That should have been the end of the case, right? Number.
I normally don't go through her phone at all, but her phone just kept on buzzing, and it was a text message, and the text message said, "It was good, I want some more."
What?
In my mind, I'm thinking like, you're supposed to be my fiance, and I'm seeing this.
From the outset, Ms. Todd made it clear that she believed Mr. Foster was responsible for Selena's existence. Their relationship was punctuated by wild, reckless nights that blurred the line between love and lust. Yet, amid those feverish moments, doubts had crept in. Although she had admitted to cheating once, she had conveniently downplayed it as a one-time mistake.
You say you cheated with this guy more than one time before you were engaged.
Yes.
So how'd you get to the point where you found out she cheated, but you still asked her to marry you?
No, we was already engaged first.
She said you weren't.
We was.
Ms. Todd presented her case with fiery determination, showcasing text messages and photographs that she claimed proved Mr. Foster's paternity. She painted a picture of a couple so intimately entwined that every unprotected encounter should have left an indelible mark. She recalled the long nights they spent together. The underlying suggestion was clear. Their torrid escapades, repeated night after night, made it impossible for anyone else to have fathered Selena.
During your pregnancy, he wasn't involved at all?
No. I wanted him to go to see the ultrasound pictures with me, and I have proof right here that I have. He didn't want to go.
What proof did you bring? Ron, will you please hand me this proof? What is this, Miss Todd?
When I found out what I was having, I wanted him to be there. He wasn't there at all.
This is your ultrasound?
Yes.
Then, the twist. In the middle of the courtroom drama, Mr. Foster's mother, Ms. Foster, stood to testify. According to Ms. Foster's testimony, she had received a call from Mr. Foster while he was in Vegas, away from the situation entirely. She later learned that Ms. Todd was with a friend who was not Mr. Foster, and more importantly, this man was apparently the baby's true father.
Mr. Foster's mother.
Correct.
Why don't you believe your son is not this child's father?
Miss Todd admitted that the other guy was the father. I was in Vegas. I received a phone call from my son stating that Mrs. Todd didn't have a place to stay. Once I made it back home, I sat her down at the table and I asked her, was it a chance that my son was the father? She said.
Mr. Foster, on the other hand, was a man torn between his sense of duty and a seething anger born from betrayal. He had stepped up and embraced his role as Selena's legal father, signing the birth certificate, attending ultrasounds, and even driving her mother to the hospital on that unforgettable day.
Family members of hers were calling me, let me know that this guy was the father. He didn't want to be involved.
Hold on. You had her family members calling you to say that this other guy, this friend, was really the father.
Correct.
Ms. Todd's friend had raised his suspicions, yet, in the heat of that moment, he chose to ignore the red flags, clinging instead to the hope that their unprotected passion would solidify their bond. But would he regret that? Let's find out.
Do you see the resemblance, Mr. Foster?
I see some, but I don't think that I'm the father. I'm not the father.
How about you, Ms. Foster?
Not really.
So at the point your son signs his birth certificate, that's why you said to him, well, you signed the birth certificate, now you might as well marry her.
Yes, because he was advised not to do it.
Then came the moment of reckoning, the long-awaited DNA test results. The judge examined all the evidence, absorbing the testimonies and the emotional weight, before prepping the room for the crucial moment.
Mr. Foster, you are her father.
Oh,
I told you so. I told you was her father.